Imagine waking up in a frozen forest where the air itself feels like it's trying to kill you, the ground is rock-hard ice, and one wrong move means death. No heaters, no modern clothes, no medicine. Yet thousands of years ago, Germanic tribes didn't just survive this nightmare, they thrived. And what they knew might shock you, because their secret wasn't strength, or weapons, or even fire. It was something far more brutal and clever. And it started with their homes, because instead of building tall wooden houses like we imagine, many Germanic families lived in low, sunken huts dug into the earth, where the ground acted like natural insulation, trapping warmth and blocking deadly winds. And inside these dark shelters, entire families slept close together with animals nearby, not for comfort, but for survival, because body heat was life, and cold was death. And if you think clothing saved them, think again, because thin fabric was useless in -40 degrees Fahrenheit, so they wore heavy animal skins, layered fur and thick wool, often greasy and unwashed, not for fashion, but because dirt and fat actually trapped heat better. And here's the shocking part. They didn't fear the cold like we do. They respected it, because their bodies were trained from childhood to endure freezing temperatures. Kids ran barefoot in snow, men bathed in icy rivers, and their blood circulation adapted to the cold, turning pain into endurance. But cold wasn't the only killer. Hunger was worse, because when winter came, food vanished, crops died, animals disappeared, and starvation stalked every village. So the Germanic tribes prepared months in advance, drying meat, smoking fish, fermenting vegetables and storing grain in underground pits. And when supplies ran low, they didn't hesitate to eat things we'd never touch: bone marrow, animal fat, even bark soup, because survival didn't care about taste, only calories. And yet, food alone wasn't enough, because winter brought disease, frostbite and deadly infections. And without doctors or medicine, the tribes relied on herbal knowledge passed down for generations, using pine resin, moss, and fermented brews to treat wounds, while elders acted as healers, deciding who lived and who was left behind. And here's the dark truth. The weak didn't always survive, because in extreme cold, mercy could kill the entire tribe, and when storms trapped them for weeks, cutting off hunting and travel, they turned to storytelling, rituals, and fire gatherings, not for entertainment, but for mental survival, because isolation breaks the mind faster than cold breaks the body. And their myths about gods, monsters, and winter spirits weren't just stories, they were psychological armor, helping people face endless darkness without losing hope. But the most powerful secret of all wasn't physical, it was social, because no one survived alone. Villages worked like one body, sharing food, guarding fires, and protecting each other. And anyone who refused to cooperate was pushed out, straight into the frozen wilderness, where survival lasted hours, not days. And this brutal unity is why Germanic tribes didn't vanish like many others. They adapted, endured, and passed their knowledge forward, shaping the future of Northern Europe. And here's the final twist. Modern humans, with all our technology, struggle in cold climates, while ancient tribes with nothing but fur, fire, and willpower mastered nature itself, proving that survival isn't about comfort, it's about adaptation. And in the coldest places on Earth, only the toughest minds truly live. If you think surviving the cold was the hardest challenge for the Germanic tribes, think again, because winter didn't just freeze the land, it froze morality, turning every decision into a life or death gamble, where kindness could mean extinction, and ruthlessness could mean survival. Because when food ran out and the snow refused to melt, the tribes faced a terrifying choice: protect everyone and risk starving together, or sacrifice the weakest to save the strong. And history shows they often chose survival over sentiment. Elders, the sick, and the injured were sometimes left behind, not out of cruelty, but because carrying them through frozen forests could doom the entire group. And this harsh reality shaped their mindset into something modern humans can barely imagine, where emotions were controlled, tears were hidden, and strength was respected above all else. And yet, despite this brutality, their world wasn't empty of humanity, because family bonds were sacred, bloodlines were protected, and children were the future, trained from the moment they could walk to face the cold, the hunger, and the fear without hesitation. Boys learned to hunt in blizzards. Girls learned to preserve food with frozen hands, and both learned that winter was not an enemy, but a test. And every year the test grew harder, because climate shifts made winters longer, darker, and deadlier. forcing tribes to migrate deeper into forests and mountains, where predators like wolves and bears hunted the same prey as humans, turning every hunt into a battle for dominance. And when food was scarce, even animals became desperate, attacking camps, stealing supplies, and threatening children, so the tribes built defensive fire circles at night, surrounding their shelters with burning torches to keep beasts away. And the flickering flames didn't just scare predators, they also fought something more dangerous: the darkness inside the human mind, because endless night breaks people, and when the sun disappears for weeks, fear grows louder than hunger. So the Germanic tribes created winter rituals, not for religion, but for survival. They sang, danced, and told heroic stories around the fire to remind each other that winter ends, that life continues, and that death is not the final chapter. And these rituals weren't optional. They were psychological medicine. Without them, despair would spread faster than frostbite. And here's the shocking part: the tribes didn't just endure winter, they used it as a weapon, because frozen rivers became highways for raids, snow-covered forests hid warriors from enemies, and icy nights allowed surprise attacks on rival clans who were unprepared. Meaning winter wasn't just a season, it was a strategic advantage, turning the cold into an ally, not an enemy. And their enemies learned this the hard way, as entire villages were wiped out by silent warriors moving through snowstorms like ghosts, proving that survival wasn't about avoiding danger, it was about mastering it. But even mastery had limits, because disease followed winter like a shadow. Lungs froze, wounds infected, and coughs turned into death sentences. And without modern medicine, the tribes relied on herbal smoke, animal fat, and fermented drinks to fight sickness, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. And when death came, it wasn't hidden, it was accepted. Bodies were burned or buried in frozen ground. And the tribe moved forward, because stopping meant dying. And this constant exposure to death created a generation that feared weakness more than mortality. Where bravery was expected, silence was strength, and endurance was identity. But the cold shaped more than just survival tactics. It shaped culture, because Germanic myths were born from winter. Gods of thunder, frost giants, fire spirits, and monsters that lived in the dark were reflections of the environment they faced. And these stories weren't just entertainment, they were survival manuals, teaching lessons about courage, preparation, and respect for nature. And the greatest lesson was simple: nature cannot be conquered, only respected. And those who forgot this vanished into the snow, never to be seen again. But here's the twist that most people never hear. The Germanic tribes didn't just survive winter, they planned their entire lives around it. Marriages happened in warmer seasons, wars were avoided in extreme cold unless absolutely necessary, food was rationed months ahead, and every decision was made with winter in mind, meaning survival wasn't a reaction. It was a strategy, a mindset passed down through generations, turning hardship into tradition, and tradition into power. And this is why their descendants went on to shape the future of Europe, because people forged in ice do not break easily. And even today, when modern humans step into freezing environments with heated jackets and advanced tools, many still fail, while ancient tribes with nothing but fire, fur, and iron endured, proving one brutal truth: comfort makes us weak, and hardship makes us unstoppable. And the real survival secret of the Germanic tribes wasn't just how they lived in the cold, it was how the cold lived inside them, shaping their strength, their culture, their legends, and their legacy forever. But the cold didn't just shape how the Germanic tribes survived, it reshaped who they became, because when generations grow up fighting frost, famine, and fear, their identity turns into something harder, sharper, and unbreakable. And this is where their true legacy begins, not in frozen huts or fur clothing, but in the warrior mindset that winter forged, because every man who survived the brutal seasons became more than a hunter. He became a protector, a fighter, and a symbol of endurance. And every woman who preserved food, raised children, and kept the fire alive became the backbone of the tribe, carrying knowledge more valuable than any weapon. And this balance of strength and survival created a society where respect was earned through endurance, not words. And when spring finally arrived, it wasn't celebrated with luxury, it was celebrated with relief, because surviving winter meant you had already won the hardest battle of the year. And yet, peace never lasted long, because neighboring tribes competed for land, food, and resources, and those who survived the cold best also fought the fiercest wars, using tactics learned from winter itself, striking fast, disappearing into forests, and enduring long campaigns without comfort. making them terrifying opponents, and their reputations spread across Europe as warriors who could not be broken by hunger, cold, or fear. But here's the deeper truth. These warriors weren't fearless. They were prepared because fear existed, but it was controlled, trained, and sharpened by years of survival, turning emotion into discipline and discipline into power. And when enemies attacked, they didn't panic, they adapted, because adaptation was the one skill winter had taught them better than any sword. And this is why their culture valued strength, loyalty, and honor so deeply, because betrayal in winter meant death, and unity meant survival, and those values didn't fade when the snow melted. They became the foundation of their identity, passed down through stories, rituals, and laws, shaping future generations who would carry the same mindset into new lands, new wars, and new challenges. And as time passed, the Germanic tribes didn't remain isolated in frozen forests. They migrated, expanded, and collided with the Roman world, bringing their winter-forged toughness into a civilization built on stone, roads, and comfort. And the clash was brutal, because while Rome had technology, the Germanic warriors had resilience, and history shows that resilience often outlasts luxury, because when empires weaken, it's the hardened survivors who rise, and the descendants of these cold-forged tribes went on to shape medieval Europe, influencing everything from warfare to culture, from leadership to law, and even the modern idea of toughness itself. But here's the final reveal. The real survival secret of the Germanic tribes wasn't fur, fire, food, or even unity. It was acceptance. Acceptance of hardship as a way of life, acceptance of suffering as a teacher, and acceptance of nature as a force greater than human will. And by accepting these truths, they stopped fighting the cold and started learning from it, turning winter into a mentor instead of an enemy. And this mindset is something modern humans have lost, because today we avoid discomfort, chase comfort, and fear struggle. But comfort makes us fragile, while hardship makes us resilient. And the Germanic tribes proved this with every frozen breath they took, every winter they survived, and every generation they raised. And so, the story of life at -40 degrees Fahrenheit isn't just about ancient survival, it's a warning, a lesson, and a challenge. Because in a world where comfort is everywhere, strength is disappearing, and only those who remember how to endure will stand when comfort fails, just like the Germanic tribes did in the coldest, darkest winters of history.